everyone. Welcome back to Highly Inspired. I'm Ella.
And I'm Jordan.
Hey guys, this week we are going to be talking about the topic, I support the current thing. And this is something that definitely kind of came out of a meme that was circulating a few weeks ago, where you just kind of start to realize with everything that goes on in the mainstream narrative and what people are pushing, that the same types of people are just blindly supporting the next thing without like closing out the previous thing, or really like critically thinking about what their position is and establishing their own position, or just maybe having no position for like a few weeks.
Yes.
It seems that we now live in this culture with social media where the minute something is going on in the world, we put all of our eyes on that, forget about everything else, and then everyone just has the same opinion. And I think that even though this can be kind of like a serious topic, it is also comical and kind of has some lightheartedness to it as well.
Yes, it's an interesting thing. And I mean, look at all of the words that have come out of the last couple years that we're kind of creating. We're creating a whole new vocabulary, like words like cancel culture, or we're tossing around the word narrative all the time. And all these things kind of all tie to the very straightforward statement, which is just, I support the current thing. Like the opposite of that is cancel culture, because if you don't support the current thing, then you're going to get canceled, or, there's all these different
or just feel
dynamics
left out.
with it.
Yeah,
exactly. So, I mean, it really can be boiled down to that, like whether you support the current thing or you don't support the current thing, whatever that thing is. It could
or you're
be,
just like, I don't know. Like,
like there's no nuance to it. It actually creates a very black and white, dichotomy over whatever that issue is, or whatever that, idea is.
Yes. And I think that first of all, it's okay. Once you figure out what the pattern is, then you're able to like have those red flags to be like, okay, this is one of those, I support the current thing. And I think for me, it took a few cycles of that to happen to like understand this pattern. And then when that meme finally hit, which we'll tag, that's when it all clicked for me that like, oh, this
all
is
of
like
these
a
cycles
real,
of
like
big
this,
things.
Yes. And I think it started, at least for me, it started with COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And then then it was BLM.
Mm-hmm.
Then it was veganism saves the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's Ukraine. And it's just like it's what
vaccine, you could say.
The vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it definitely. And at first, like when we've talked about this without getting into too much detail, but like when COVID first hit, it was like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy. Like it seems so nuanced. It seemed like, oh yes, of course, like the natural reaction would be to shut down, and it seemed really scary and stuff like that. I remember those like first initial images that we saw from China, from Wuhan,
it was terrifying.
The hazmat suits.
It was horrible. Well, yeah, because it was such an unknown. It was uncharted territory. But yeah, slowly but surely.
And you saw someone with a mask and you thought they were sick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. I know. I remember I walked into a Whole Foods one time to go grocery shopping, and this was like right after we first heard about what coronavirus was, and I genuinely was like avoiding this one poor woman the entire time I shopped for my groceries because he thought she had coronavirus. I regret that because I dehumanized her when I shouldn't have, because I didn't know. It was because of ignorance. But yeah, no, I would never, ever, ever do that now.
And I think before social media, it was harder to like recognize this, like I support the current thing, because there wasn't a platform for people who didn't support that to like speak out against it. But now that everything, even though people like to say like big tech is centralized, I do think, at least for the moment, Twitter is more decentralized than like listening to Fox News or listening to CNN and those being your only options, because at least it is still a little bit like the Wild West out there, even though stuff gets taken down or flagged or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But
and the ratio of content that might be censored to content that isn't being censored on Twitter is pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, you're getting a lot of raw dialogue and raw conversation. And it's in the most casual, most of the time, just like shooting from the hip type of statements that you see in the media world, because it's not people reading off of a teleprompter or, Tucker Carlson having an entire 24 hours to prepare for his 1 hour segment each day. It's so instantaneous, and I actually really like that raw factor for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And something else that I've thought about too is just, I don't know, it was like, I think that also with social media, there's such an opportunity for you to have your own identity with an issue. And we have all this like symbolism too. So with COVID, it was like you put a mask in your bio, you put the photo of you with the mask on as your profile photo, you put the shot emojis. I mean, it got so out of hand. There was even a Facebook cover art that you could put on your profile photo that said, I got my COVID-19 vaccine. I mean, and it was so normalized,
Yeah.
And
there's like a whole new Instagram story filter for it.
Yeah. You got that social currency kind of like that Black Mirror episode, if you guys have seen it, where you get points for social media and that affects what you can get in real life. It's basically a social credit score.
It's like self-earning for points.
Yeah, and you go crazy if you don't have like that image out there, but then you're miserable in the real world.
Yeah.
And, then we saw that with BLM, with the black square. And like each time it made me, and then I remember in the real world, I started having all these friends that all of a sudden were becoming vegan out of nowhere. And they weren't really fully following it. And they made like a really big deal about it every time they were like in a group setting.
Yeah. And like weaved it into every single conversation opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah. Got weird if you were eating meat. Would deep clean the grill if they want after you cook the steak, and now they want to cook their Beyond Burger situation, and they're like,
okay, can we just talk about that? Because I've been seeing a lot of breakdowns of comparing real beef to Beyond Beef, and I'm not a food scientist by any means.
You aren't?
No, I'm not. If you can't tell. But the Beyond Beef ingredients list is actually 15 plus, it's more than 15 ingredients.
Yeah.
And the second ingredient is expeller press canola oil, which canola oil on its own,
is
not
horrible.
expeller press, is already bad, but expeller press means that it's even more tampered with.
Are you kidding me? There's a worse thing than canola oil?
It's like, okay, wheat like gluten, whatever, but enriched wheat flour is even worse than wheat.
Yeah.
So it's like we're already messing with it. So that's literally the second ingredient in Beyond Meat. And now there's like multiple other Beyond Meat brands, really? Which I'm like I need to learn some of the brand names. But yeah, this is going to be a whole new food group at this point.
Which we're already seeing that we already realized, like, I had no idea how bad canola oil was for you up until a year or two ago. I didn't think it was awesome, but I didn't think it was any different than like butter or olive oil or something that you cook with. But I think we all just thought like, oh, you put it in cookies and when you bake, and it's like butter, eggs, like all those other basic ingredients. But it's so much different than that. I mean, butter is 10 times better than that. And then you also see these plant-based butters where, again, it's like canola oil, because you have to use something.
And again, it's the ingredient list being like 13 things long,
if not more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
I am grateful for the nutrition movements that have gone on in the last 10 months, or 10 years, I think have brought out a lot more awareness to like other types of like oils for sure. Because I feel like when I was growing up, I kind of thought there was only like one type of oil, like vegetable oil, like whatever you put in to bake with. But now we know you've got avocado oils and like coconut oils, and there's all these different ones that we're now coming out with, which I think that a lot of those alternatives are 100% better than things like canola oil and like all of these super processed inflammatory oils that are not good for you.
Well, yeah, no, for sure. And I think, again, all these issues So on top of, okay, so like what are our red flags so far? So our red flags are that you have to do a public form of activism or symbolism as to what your position is. So whether that's wearing a mask, posting a photo of a mask, posting your vaccine status, posting the black square for BLM,
Posting your
advertising,
solidarity with Ukraine.
posting your solidarity with the flag, the Ukrainian flag, or being like super outwardly like vegan all the time.
Or even with like, remember that bombing that happened in Lebanon? Like everyone started posting, like donation links for like Lebanon, and like it was like a whole thing. Not on the same scale as like BLM and Ukraine, but that was another one. And then unfortunately, the US didn't get anything like that for what happened in Afghanistan. No one was I support the current thing when it was pro-America and pro-US military in Afghanistan.
They did do that. They did do that with bringing with like the refugee crisis. But then again, like what was the messaging behind that? And again, it's like, should we have even been in Afghanistan in the first place? And I just think that these things, another red flag that I get is that these topics get presented in such black and white terms. And it's just that's also a huge red flag for me, because I think think about your own life. Think about one problem that you've dealt with in your personal life and how complex that was. And there were way less parties involved, way less drama, way less circumstances. But still, like, think about one specific dramatic thing that happened in your personal life and how complicated that was. Okay, then take COVID. Take BLM, take the Ukraine situation. You think that's that black and white? You think it's as good as simple as US good, Russia bad? No, it is it's so complex than that. And then what we do is we get into this automatic, we're like super emotionally charged, especially as females, and we get into this mode where we're not just posting, which has external effects, but we're also donating money. And we saw with BLM,
and a lot of times targeting other people around us
that aren't reacting,
and
the
sort
same
of having
way.
this radar of who's doing what I'm doing, who's on my level, like, oh, I got to stay above them, or I've got to do more, and then it becomes this like competition of virtue signaling as to who's doing the most or who's speaking out the most, and it becomes this like, a competition that doesn't even need to be there because of that emotionally charged energy that, people sort of bring onto themselves.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's not brought on from us. It's kind of brought on from a multitude of things, probably a little bit from ourselves, but also the external stimuli that comes from the media and social media 100%, like top down, kind of like you see a celebrity that you really, really like and then repost what they post. And I think there's this chain reaction of, it gets down to basically just everybody at some point is like posting the same thing. So it's really interesting how that happens. And I mean, it's kind of like, there's a science to it for sure. But
yeah, and then you start to feel like the odd one out for maybe feeling differently or just being like, I don't, I think that we forget how powerful words are. Words and actions. And so by blindly reposting something, blindly repeating an opinion about something without putting any deep thought into it or forming your own like critical thoughts or research behind something, or just being like, you know what, it's really complicated, I don't really know, or that doesn't affect me right now. Like, I just don't.
Like, I'm in a different stage in my life. I haven't really been keeping up to speed with what's going on.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I know enough details
to speak
on the matter
like,
to speak on
we don't
it.
even make that okay. And I don't, like, not everyone is a, that's another part of this. It's a red flag. It's this expert mentality, right? How can the average population be an expert in medical disease, vaccine research, racial history and relations,
psychology,
foreign policy,
foreign policy,
Ukrainian government, like
military strategy.
Yeah, like I'm sorry, but we
can't.
We can't be experts in all of this. And for everyone to take on this mentality of, oh, I am an expert in all these categories because I read one infographic on Instagram. Like, no.
No.
Like,
I'm sorry, but the majority of life cannot be boiled down
to an infographic,
to a 4-lined typographic infographic, that explains whatever it's trying to explain. I wish life were like that, but it is not like that. There's a lot more detail and nuance involved.
And the money thing is also, for me, like a red flag, just because we know that a lot of billionaires use foundations, charities to funnel money into these organizations that are promoting forced vaccination on different countries, exporting our way of life onto other smaller countries in Africa, disrupting currencies there, water supplies, and even trying to centralize things for the West, with that being their ultimate goal. And so when I saw the BLM stuff where everyone was donating to one centralized website, it wasn't like it was going to a specific, now there were some charities outside of like the direct Black Lives Matter that people were donating to that maybe were more like specific to prison reform or like helping people transition back into their normal life after like a drug addiction or like something like that.
And people probably help locally a lot too, like finding specific neighborhoods that had certain, campaigns going on. But
the majority of the money went to the BLM organization, and that money ended up going directly to the founders who were buying multi-million-dollar houses. And that got uncovered. Like, that is common knowledge now. It's been in the news for several months. And so when I see this Ukraine stuff, also a red flag, because I'm like, okay, where's the money going to? Like, especially when we know from years of all media, the New York Times, Washington Post, all across the board, reporting that the Ukraine is a corrupt country, and knowing that there was a a rebellion that happened in 2014, and since then the country has pretty much been a money laundering place for a lot of
it's the human trafficking capital of the world.
Yeah, and there's Nazis there. I mean, it's not like this utopian country. Not that any country's like that. And I'm not saying that I'm like a Russian sympathizer. I don't think we should be invading like sovereign countries or whatever. But I just think it's
we're not in support of the activities that are going on there and how Russia's gone about this.
But how does just donating money blindly to the Ukraine solve anything? Like, where is that money going to? Especially when we know all the sketchy stuff that does happen there with money. So how do we know? And then
would you want your money to be going into one of the most massive like human trafficking rings in the entire world? Like, would you want that?
Do you want your money?
How can you prove it?
To Hunter Biden's art fund?
No.
No, a serious question. Serious question.
No, I mean, no, I would not. But I mean, I would like to see. I mean, he's just such an interesting dude. Like, how does this person exist?
You know that I was on a wait list for a Hunter Biden doll, like a Barbie doll. I was gonna give it as a Christmas gift,
like an action figure.
Yeah,
type
it's like
thing?
an action figure type that they're selling it on Etsy, and.
That's a genius product
but it
idea.
had a little laptop, like a Biden laptop. It had the red scarf and the like diaper.
Oh my gosh!
And
so
it's
the whole accessory lineup.
And then it had a little baggie of Coke, and what else? It had the Biden laptop.
So he was naked, like shirtless, and just had like tidy whities on.
Yeah, it was like a Barbie Ken doll, but like Barbie Ken.
With like a bit of a 5 o'clock shadow type thing.
The Hunter Biden edition.
That is hilarious. You should get that. We should get that one of those and just, like, auction it off.
Right here.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what we get our Kickstarter.
Just donor. A bunch of Hunter Biden dolls.
I don't know.
With the accessories included.
Yeah. Well, we actually do have a few more days of the Kickstarter left. If people want to check
I'm
it
into
out.
that. I do. Okay, so I do have a question for you.
Okay.
Going back to sort of the virtue signaling with BLM or like some of these other, large scale eras of, world events that are going on. Has anyone ever targeted you and called you out for not posting some sort of messaging in support of the current thing?
Not directly, weirdly enough, because I have heard more people than not say like, yeah, during that time or during this time, people DM me and I don't know why no one DM'd me about it. Maybe it's because I kind of put up like a shield, or I like kind of stay more under the radar on social media. I'm not sure, but I have heard stories that were shocking. And also there was the sorority like organization that I was a part of and that we were a part of in college did put a lot of pressure on people really early on to, again, like tap into this emotionally charged energy that to me felt it felt inauthentic. I thought that making a bunch of girls in the middle of COVID get on a Zoom and cry about like what was going on and then telling people to go to protest at night, where some of these protests were kind of turning into riots, and posting riot gear to wear for safety protection. Like, I just felt like that was the wrong direction.
I'm like trying not to laugh, but I can't stop. This
I did say that
this
with
picture
a
that you're
face.
painting is very detailed, and I wish some of it were not true. But yes, some of this did happen. We were a part
Some
of
of it, all
we
of
were
it
a part of an
happened.
organization where there were individuals that were our age that were following that series of events during that year, and were so obsessed with it that it was like they wanted to bring everybody to their same level in like a very forced manner. And yeah, I mean, you got to think something's fishy when you're like actually looking up how to make a hazmat suit. Like, I don't want to ever hit that stage in my life where I'm actually Googling instructions on how to do that.
Yeah, there was a girl that was like,
that's not something to
meet
revel
me
in.
Portland, Oregon. I'm like, you're gonna get in the middle of
You're gonna make me drive 14 hours to Portland, Oregon to like actually risk my life.
I'm like, honey, this isn't a protest. This is gonna be the Proud Boys standoff.
This is
with
an
Antifa.
ambush.
Like, I mean, you're gonna get
it's an ambush, and that's not. I mean, that's not. You're not a bad person for
wanting. No, she
considering
was,
other
she was so
alternatives.
innocent. Like she no bad intentions, but I think. Again, that's what's scary too, is that it's when you're naive that you can get wrapped up in this stuff because you're trying to be a good person. You're trying to do the right thing.
Intentions are good.
And intentions are good, but it with the wrong direction and with so much energy going into one area, you're going to get misguided. Like, that's just going to happen.
Yeah. And with that driving incentive of, I need more social points, I need more, proof of my heroism, I think that can sort of detract from your critical thinking skills sometimes. And so, because you're so focused on, I want to post this. I want to post this picture at this rally, or I want to post this picture that I feel like will hit hard for a lot of people that are following this current social movement right now. Is that worth your safety? Is that worth, your morals and ethics? Is that worth losing your critical thinking along the way? I mean, those are just questions that I think people should be asking themselves in those moments.
Well, I agree. And I honestly think part of the problem why it's easy to get wrapped in on this is because we live in a culture that rewards fake heroism, fake standing up, fake support of ideas that really aren't that radical, and we aren't supportive of true bravery, true heroism, true the real underdog in the situations. If anything, we paint that as selfish, And I recently feel like with some personal experience that I've been going through, something that to me felt like taking responsibility for my actions and becoming more of an adult and rising to the occasion and taking on more responsibility in a particular situation. Other people that were close to me viewed that as me being selfish, and it actually wasn't a selfish decision. There actually wasn't even a decision to be made, but it was just moving into a stage in my life where that was what had to be done in this particular situation. And I think that that's like where we're at as a society, is things that used to be regarded as you taking responsibility are now painted as you being selfish, and the things that should be being selfish are painted as you being responsible and caring. Yeah. And so we're now like all messed up, and our orientation is messed up.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like for Gen Z, especially, if we're not encouraging one another in our age group, folks like that relate to us in our stage of life, if we're not encouraging each other to be more responsible and are encouraging one another to be more selfish, how are we ever going to mature? At least, I mean, I would hope that we could mature quicker and hopefully more efficient and better than previous generations. Like, that's what evolution is. And we want to evolve. We want to, leave a good legacy. And it's hard to do that when you're rewarding behaviors that don't deserve to be rewarded.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
And I feel like, honestly, standing up for the right thing doesn't necessarily mean it's going to feel good.
No.
Like, it might, in the long term, it will, because you'll be at peace, but that doesn't mean that you're going to feel warm and fuzzy. A lot of times when you do the right thing, a lot of people like don't understand, or they won't endorse it, or they're so brainwashed in a sense to do the I support the next thing that they can't see what supporting the right thing is, because they're so focused on this, and so then when you say something like, like an example is like, I'm for preserving the planet. I love nature. I've grown more of an appreciation of it over the past few years. I've grown to like camping and to be in the woods and be part of nature. Like, I love it. Yeah. And I want to preserve that for future generations. And I don't deny that, we don't have an effect on our environment. That would be naive. But I think that it's not as simple as we all go vegan, because what people don't take into account, for example, is the fact that big agriculture is not good for the environment. So just because you get rid of eating meat doesn't mean that you're still not getting vegetables that contribute to carbon emissions. Yeah. And so it's like little arguments like that, where it's like, okay, it's not that simple. And so by me telling you the truth, that makes people uncomfortable and doesn't feel good. It doesn't always make you feel automatically great. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, for someone to stand up against someone who is a part of the group that is supporting the current thing, you don't have that social reinforcement from other people. Yeah. I mean, maybe sometimes you do, but it's most of the time not going to be the same amount of people as the side of the people that are supporting the current thing. Like, they have that, that reinforcement of, oh, well, everybody else thinks this. Yeah. So like, I'm right. We're right. Like, look at us. Like, if you weigh the numbers, there's more people that think this way. So when you see those numbers too, I think that, and social media makes it very overt, because polls, you can see how many people are liking a post. You can see how many people are commenting on a post, or say someone like, Beyonce or Jay-Z having like the most Instagram followers out of anyone on the platform. When they post something, it's like, oh, so if this amount of people follow them and they think this, so that means all of these 200 million people are behind them and they think this, then I think that weirdly there is a numbers sort of equation that happens in people's minds when they're weighing who to agree with or not agree with when they don't know the facts of a situation. And so the initial, sort of resort is just to kind of stick to that because it's easy and it gives you an instruction manual that you don't have to really like look into that much.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good point. And I feel the numbers thing is interesting that you bring that up because there was something that I thought about. Actually, it had to do with the electoral college. And I remember this was like several years ago when that was like a big discussion, like we should get rid of the electoral college. And it was because it was after Trump's election, people thought, Hillary won the popular vote, she should win. And so people were upset. And what I try to tell people is that we are not a direct democracy. We are a
Democratic
republic. And the reason why it's not like our founding fathers never thought of a direct democracy. It's not like this is some revolutionary idea that they never thought of. No, they thought through it and they realized actually the majority always making the decision isn't always the best because groupthink is a real psychological thing that happens. And sometimes you need the minority who sees the truth to outweigh the majority. And so the
only way to do that is to figure out a system that goes against that sole numbers game of just looking at the collective, and that's what the electoral college is. It is that system.
And they're in us having 2 senators and stuff like this. It's this constant balance between population and or direct democracy and republic, right? And so I just think that is very interesting too, because if you go look back in history, like, okay, there was a point in history where the majority of Americans were pro-slavery. Does that mean slavery was correct because the majority of them, or were the minority correct? And you know what I'm saying? So like, do you think now when people look back at us that people who held the majority view that won't get looked back at history and be like, that was the incorrect view? And that's what people need to keep in mind, is that just because you're in the majority doesn't mean that you have the right opinion. And sometimes the majority view sounds like, especially we're so good at marketing stuff that we make it sound just so appealing, but in reality I don't think it's always the most humane take.
And for people who are considering switching a side or switching a stance, whether it's on like a public forum or personally, don't be afraid to be in that like smaller numbered minority either, because I mean, clearly history shows, even bringing up the slavery thing, like at some point the minority amount of people who were anti-slavery were able to, bring enough awareness and fight hard enough to like, help us evolve so that we could abolish slavery. Like that happened. And look at all these other things in history that have that similar pattern. Like a minority started somewhere.
Well, getting rid of the vax mandates.
A force started and then it grew and then it grew and then it grew and then we made change happen. So like right now there's things all over the world where we have minorities of people, and if you're someone who wants to join that cause and switch your stance, don't be afraid to do that because you think you're outnumbered or that that small minority could never actually, prevail over the majority, because it totally can.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, I think that gives people a lot of hope. I think right now, I think that with each of these, I support the current thing, there's been more and more people that are aware each time there's a new I support the current thing, because I think it's becoming so obvious at this point that we're getting even better and faster at recognizing this. And they did like a survey study in Canada, and the question was, or this was basically how it was set up, was how it was unvaccinated versus vaccinated people. And the people who were vaccinated basically were a higher percentage of imposing tougher economic sanctions on Russia, versus people that were unvaccinated had the opposite opinion. So it's very interesting. And we'll put this graph up when we in post-production. But it's very interesting to see those correlations of people that once they have that skepticism mechanism in place and they figured out the skepticism in one area, they're able to then apply it across the board, and they're able to be faster at it when stuff comes up. And so maybe COVID, it took them several months, several weeks to figure that out, but now they're able to be faster at that. And whether, you can't be a skeptic.
Silver lining right there.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that this is a huge silver lining, and something that has really, to me, been so interesting about this Ukraine thing is that it's exposed so many different layers of all these I support the current things, because you have these sanctions which are showing how dependent we are on foreign countries, when we have plenty of oil here and plenty of resources here, and we could do other things that even that are more renewable, and we don't do fracking here. It's just, so we do all these things, and it's like, is it really that much more sustainable to get overseas and lug it over here? And so again, I think it's
little control and
exactly.
all of the transportation that's involved in that process. It's like, is it worth it? But
it exposed the Rhino Republicans, because there was this video clip that went viral of McCain and I think Lindsey Graham, and you know what I'm talking about, and they're basically saying, back in I think 2014 or 2016, pre-Trump, that this is where we stand with the Ukraine, and basically insinuating some sort of conflict that's going to happen there. So I think that this shows what delays at least the Trump administration had with certain foreign policy stuff that had been so set in place with people that people on the right thought were on their side, but really were warmongers. And it shows that military industrial complex too. So it's exposed that.
Scary.
And it's also exposed the fact that we invade sovereign countries. It's exposed the truths of what happened post 9/11 with a lot of those countries. I mean, the same day that Russia's invading the Ukraine, we're bombing Somalia. So it shows that we do a lot of this same stuff. And why are we in these countries? Why do we need to be the peacemakers of the world? What's our moral stance to stand against Russia when we are doing similar things? So it's exposing that. So this conflict is touching on so many different arenas. It's even touching on some of the race stuff too, I think.
I agree. I'm glad that it's raising awareness and exposing us, sort of just reminding us how many factors are involved with what we do overseas, globally, here, etc. But I just want people to, remind themselves too that you should pay attention to what they're trying to subvert our attention to, and to make sure that that's not too much of an attention sucker that we forget about some of these what we're doing in other countries. Because I do think that the media is remarkably good at putting our attention where they want our attention to be, and so that we forget other problems that we need to be talking about.
Exactly.
Because that's literally been the definition of what we've been in with COVID, and just subverted attention and blaming everybody else except for taking accountability for things that we've done wrong here.
Yeah, and to me, this whole Ukraine thing has exposed how we get into this cycle of wars. And this has been through pretty much every administration, post World War II. It's just our military budget has not decreased since World War II. And it shows that
we just feel so entitled to be involved in every single thing, and put countries in their place when we could just be our, protect our place, protect our home, but not need to branch out everywhere. Well, because what is that doing?
Unless
just complicating things.
Unless we get attacked on our soil, what's the point of
there's no point.
Yeah. And something that I noticed with this whole Ukraine thing is I've seen older members of people that I know, family, friends, or whoever, and they are like glued to the news, specifically like even like Fox News, and they're watching it all the time, every night. And then they're like, we need to do something about the Ukraine. Like, we need to get involved. We should send people over there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait, this makes so much sense. Why for decades there's been so much public support over all these wars and stuff, because
It stems from the repetition, especially from the entertainment media world, sort of
playing the images and the videos and the sad. It's sad. It is so sad.
They tug at your heartstrings and make you see all this footage, and it's very real and raw, and it makes you, think, oh, I want to change that. I want to help. But the way to help isn't by, getting involved in a war sense, because
and heightening to World War III.
we need to do everything we can to avoid that. It would literally be the death of us at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, we're already so flustered from how much our world has been through in the last year or so, let alone like take it to a physical sense, not like health wise, but like literally survival wise. I don't know why that would be good right now, but
what conspiracy wide, or like if you had to put like your tinfoil hat on, what do you feel like is the globalist position on what's happening with Ukraine and World War III, and then the supply chain stuff that's been exposed because of it, because we're so dependent on other countries?
I think the globalists want more mass change to happen, because the more change, the more conditioned we are to change, the easier it is to then implement new
systems,
new institutions and things. So the more mass change in a short period of time that they can put us through, it kind of sets more of a foundation for them to implement some pretty drastic, whether it's new technologies or new institutions, new hierarchies of power. There's a lot of things that they, I'm sure, have hypothesized or might already have in the works. But I think the more shift that they can curate for us to go through, psychologically, it conditions us to be more, not open-minded, but like, I guess just prepared for like, more massive things to happen.
For sure.
So not to say, I'm not hypothesizing that will. I'm just, if I were a globalist who was power hungry, or someone like, say, Bill Gates, who, through evidence of what he works on, cares very deeply about, depopulation and wanting to, I feel like he just wants like a whole reset of how humanity works.
Yeah, sure.
The only way to really do that is to enact like massive, massive change.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is an interesting concept. Hope you guys check out our cover art, because it's literally
all over
just
the
reminiscent
internet
of the meme. We were talking about earlier about how it'd be so cool to like literally design a meme that went viral.
I know. Yeah.
You should try to do that sometime. I feel like that would be fun. I don't even know how, like the troll face and like the Pepe the Frog meme.
Yeah.
Like all of them are so different. Like they're literally just a doodle that someone sketched out on a sketchbook.
Who did Pepe the Frog? Like who?
I don't know, but Pepe's now a cryptocurrency.
Really?
Okay, you guys should check this out. It's kind of interesting. Like they made a cryptocurrency NFT, like where you buy certain NFTs and it's like linked to this certain crypto, and it's all Pepe the Frog. Like you can literally buy a Pepe GIF and like you own that Pepe.
Interesting.
Like it's actually kind of fun.
That's
if I were to buy an NFT, which I don't own any yet, I
buy a
would
Pepe.
maybe consider that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think it's like it's OG for the internet,
Yeah.
But something too that I think is interesting about, and that I find almost comical about the I support the current thing, is when one of the current things and the other current things come into conflict with each other. Like, for example, this headline of an article from Zero Hedge. The title is "The Ukraine Blocks Trans Women's Refugees. They are men. They must go back and fight." So
they are men.
So a lot of people that are the demographic for I support the current thing are also the demographic for putting like the pride flag like in their bio, being very supportive of that. And not to say you can't,
or they might even be a part of the LGBTQ community.
Yeah,
how
or
they
just,
would even identify themselves as.
Or just in a way, like there's a lot of like Tim Dillon talks about this a lot, where it's like, okay, obviously he's gay and that is like part of who he is, but it isn't his only like identity, and he's not just obsessed with all things like LGBTQ, you know?
Oh, yeah, I didn't even know that about him until like a couple months after starting to listen to him.
It's just kind of like, okay, it's the same as like, okay, like, yeah, I'm a girl. So 50% of the population are girl. Like, so what? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like I'm way more interested in like Ella McFarlane. I'm way more interested in Tim Dillon. Like, there's never going to be another Tim Dillon.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of gay guys, and not that
it's actually harder for you to be, say, just a girl, just an adult woman, and try to make yourself more unique solely through just, you know, who you are as a person. It's actually easier to diversify yourself off of identity politics, like, you know, what your race is or what your, because I mean, you're still a part of a community where there's most likely thousands of people that are identifying themselves in the same way with those identity politics, as opposed to, oh, I'm a biological female and I'm a gendered female, and my sexuality is whatever it is. Like, it's harder to define yourself solely from those like vanilla stereotypes as opposed to just resorting to trying to define yourself with the identity politics.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree. And that's why, like, for example, this like was so interesting to me, and something that I know we were going to bring up. I see it brought up on your screen, which kind of ties into what you're saying, is that there's been such a shift, and you could call it, I would say it doesn't make sense from a statistical point of view, because you go from at one point, like 3% of the population identified as LGBT, and now it's as high as 20%. And so I just think
there was
how much of that is real, and if it isn't, that's concerning that people are identifying as something that that's not truly who they are, and they're just trying to fit into a group because they don't feel like they can be themselves just as Jordan or just as Ella. We've made it like you said, it's we value people being part of groups versus people being individuals, which is scary.
Yeah, no, we want to be more for the individual and personality, you know, encouraging, not sexuality, and like I feel like that doesn't help in the long run. But I will explain the numbers here. So we found an info breakdown that showcases some numbers from a survey of almost 13,000 U.S. adults. This was from like late 2021, so just a couple months ago. Basically, it measures adults from the Gen Z generation, millennials, Gen X, baby boomers, and traditionalists. So basically the last 5 generations. And the jump from how many people that are identifying as LGBTQ, the jump from those numbers in the millennial generation to Gen Z
is crazy.
Is insane. I mean, it's literally over doubling in a decade. And just evolutionarily, like, yes, as humans, like, we evolve, and we have been evolving for like centuries, but I mean, this amount, like, we're not evolving this fast, people. Like, the psychology in the brain chemistry is not evolving like this quickly. So someone captioned this saying social engineering works. And I think that they're basically just hinting at something connected to this. I mean, this definitely has a cultural role. And I think that culture and how we've been having this conversation about the presence of LGBTQ individuals is definitely playing a role with young people and how they're formulating their mindsets on how they feel about themselves, how they feel about this entire conversation, how they feel about people around them.
Well, I just think if someone really, like, for example, if someone really is gay, like, that's going to come out one way or the other naturally, because it's just, if it's who you are, like that, like, especially the world that we live in, where you're not actively being discriminated against, it's going to come out. And that's what Tim Dillon like talks about. But if it's such a high jump, then that to me feels very environmental. And it feels like people that might not naturally be that are going into a pretend mode because they don't know how else to fit in with their peers or get attention or be special. And that makes me sad, because I don't want people to feel like they have to be part of a group identity in order to fit in. Just like if someone was in one of those groups, I wouldn't want them to feel discriminated against. I don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable, regardless of what groups you fit into or not, because at the end of the day, we're not going to all fit into the same group. The only group that we all fit into is the human race.
Yes.
And we're all going to be so different. Like no human that is ever conceived is ever the same. Like your fingerprints, everything is so uniquely you. That is why, like, when you are conceived, I mean, that DNA code will never exist again. Like that's crazy to think about.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the problem, is that we don't really understand what makes human life. We can't even define what human life is, or what makes a human, or any of that. So how can we value our humanity? We can't. So then we just
that's hard hitting right there.
We default.
How can we
into
value
these groups.
Humanity when we can't even define humanity?
We can't define life, and we can't define when life begins in this country. We have fights about it all over the state.
Yeah, we try to define ourselves with labels, like what your sexuality is, and what your race is, and what your hair color is, and what your IQ is. But we have such a hard time. And we try to define personalities with like personality tests and Myers-Briggs and SAT scores and things like that. But still, we come short in understanding, being able to value, the whole package.
Yeah.
Which is what we all
and that's
are.
why you just have to just value everyone the same, no matter what stage of life they're in, or where they're from, or what their background is, because
I totally agree.
Humans are just humans. I don't know if there's anything else to say. I feel like
I guess we can end it on that. I mean, we always end it on some sort of deep, unanticipated level, and that was a prime example of it right there.
Yeah.
So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Yeah. This is an interesting little phrase. Hope you enjoyed our lights. If you're watching this episode, we have our Ukraine lights, sort of a little ploy on what we talked about with Ukraine earlier, and I support the current thing. But keep your eyes out for the meme. It'll probably be around for a little bit.
Yeah.
And I guess we'll catch you next time.
Yeah, we'll catch you next time. This is the last week for the Kickstarter. So if you haven't checked it out already, please check out our Kickstarter. The link will be in the bio. And even if it's already, the Kickstarter's over with, just watch our video so you can kind of get a better sense of what we are and who we are, especially if you're new to the podcast. So, yeah.
And maybe drop a comment if you guys would be interested in some Hunter Biden dolls, because we might put in an order of those.
Yes.
So we'll see.
Yeah, we'd love to see the comments. So please feel free to comment. I feel like we haven't been seeing as many comments as we did in previous episodes. So we still want you guys to critique us.
Tell us you're there.
Yeah.
We love feedback, and we'll keep the content stream flowing.
Yeah.
So thank you guys so much for listening.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
We'll catch you next time.
Okay. Bye.